Welcome to Oddball. I'm Amin Elhassan. That over there is Izzy Gutierrez, and we're going to debate today. Guys, you don't want to miss today's episode. There's a lot of basketball philosophy. What constitutes improved? Because we're talking about the most improved player award. Cade Cunningham is holding strong in his lead to win the most improved player. DraftKings Sportsbook has him as a minus 165. That's a heavy favorite there. Pistons, of course, have had quite the turnaround. First team in NBA history, Izzy, to triple their wins from one season to the next. But I would argue that Cade himself only had a small increase in his own personal statistics. And I would also argue, has he even gotten better? And that's not a knock on him. I think I like him a lot. He's one of my favorite players to watch, but most improved, Izzy, dare I say it, he's not even the most improved in his own division.
Yeah. The most improved player award to me, Amin, has always been the most difficult one to really nail down. And I think it's probably first, and then coach of the year and MVP are probably second and third. And there's been like different versions of the most improved player award over the year. There's been a handful of like guys, I call them like maybe 1 year wonders, or a lot of them maybe in their second year where they kind of peaked or jumped from their first to second, where you get the most improved player award and that's pretty much it. Like you're not getting any better than that. That may be the best year you've ever had. And then you're going to drop off from there. There's been a few of those. Dana Barrosa is one of those that I think of. There's guys that sort of telling that a star is on the way. Right, like Tracy McGrady won it when he left Toronto to go to Orlando. John Morant most recently, even though we all kind of already knew. Like there's been those types of players, and then there's the type of players where it's just like, all right, you are just finally getting into the real you. You got more opportunities, maybe, and now, okay, this is what you're going to look like for the rest of your career. The ones that I don't like are the ones that, like Cade or like Ja, we're supposed to be very good, right? You are the number one or number two overall pick. Like, if you get to the point where we thought you were going to be what you thought you were going to be, we shouldn't be rewarding you with this trophy.
Well, I'll take it a step further. And I'll even allow that if you had some sort of fall. It's like, oh man, we thought you were like the best player in this draft, and now you've been terrible. You got to bounce around the league. And then you rediscover yourself. That's fine. Cade Cunningham, like John Morant, two guys I really enjoy watching. I think they're very good players. Their ascension was never in doubt. It was steady. It was according to plan. It was everything. So to call them improved, I'm like, what are we talking about here?
Yeah, there's extremes to this, right? Because like when I think of the type of player that was just literally came out of nowhere, and then had a great season and won the award, Ike Austin. Miami Heat player, but back in the 90s. He wasn't in the league for the 2 years right before, and then he got in as a backup to Alonzo Mourning, and it didn't matter the numbers. The numbers were like 9 and 7. The numbers weren't great, but he became an integral part to a rotation of a high-quality team. It's just like, wow, this guy came out of nowhere. Boom, most improved player. But now when we're doing, like you say, giving it to these guys, not only that have high expectations, but we're already there for a little while, it seems to smack the award, the spirit of the award in the face.
So the best example of what I just said about a guy who was drafted high, but it's like, oh, now you figured out. Victor Oladipo is the example, right? Yeah. Victor Oladipo was a top 3 pick by Oklahoma City and was like kind of just a guy. It was like, oh, okay, nice little player. Then he gets traded along with Sabonis in the Paul George deal, and he really flourishes in Indiana. And we're like, oh, wow. Now, some might argue, well, I mean, he was a top 3 pick. Of course he was supposed to be this good. But there was a period where we were like, maybe he's just okay. And so for me, you can be improved. But Izzy, what you're talking about is we never saw this coming, which I would argue there are a bunch of those guys right now this year. And when I said he's not even the most improved in his division, I'm thinking about Ty Jerome of the Cleveland Cavaliers. This dude was not a rotation player, ladies and gentlemen. Like his NBA life was like, I don't know. And then he gets to Cleveland. And I talked to Coach Kenny Atkinson about this at All-Star break. Like, they had no idea he was this good. Kenny was like, I had him in Golden State. I didn't know he was this good. And he took this leap, not only productivity, but confidence. That dude goes out there and he plays like, hey, man, it's my team, right? On a team with all-stars like Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell and Evan Mobley. So to me, that's the most improved player. Or if you want to go a different route, someone who's been around and like is showing us something that we hadn't seen before, I would go Ivica Zubac in the Western Conference because he was like, okay, serviceable big. Oh my God, he's housing people. To me, I'd noticed that stretch of games where he was just housing teams, and it culminated with that Clippers-Cavs game a couple of weeks ago, where it's like, okay, there's Evan Mobley and there's Jared Allen, and these are two of the best defensive bigs in the league, and they're really good, and they play on the best team in the league, and this dude made him look like he was Shaq.
The only place I'll correct you there, Victor went from Orlando to Indiana, not OKC to Indiana. He went to OKC later. That's fine. But yeah, and I'll give you another guy. And this is to me where we're just nitpicking on the word improvement, right? So I used to be where I was kind of annoyed when guys would just get a ton more minutes and then their numbers would naturally shoot up and then, oh, they're the most improved player, as opposed to actually improving as players. Tyler Herro, in the role he was in last year with better players around him, didn't put up the same numbers he is putting up now in terms of scoring, in terms of assists, in terms of efficiency, all that with, you could argue, a lesser team around him throughout the season. Obviously, Jimmy Butler wasn't there the whole time, not engaged when he was there for a lot of the time. And if you watch his game, Tyler and significantly improved. He's actually improved every single year, but significantly improved from last year to this year. I would say he has a stronger case than Cade Cunningham. If we're just talking about the semantics that we're discussing here, what is most improved?
Speaking of semantics, he was traded from Oklahoma City to Indiana. Oladipo was, but he did start his career in Orlando. So we're both kind of right. I was right on OKC to Indiana. You're right in that he started in Orlando. We're all right here. But you know who's not right? It's the people who want to see some of these other names. Here's some other names that are on the board. You got you mentioned Tyler Herro plus 10,000, Christian Braun plus 10,000, Austin Reeves plus 10,000, Evan Mobley. How does someone look at the Cavs and say Evan Mobley is the most improved? Again, he's improved. All these guys have improved. I'm not knocking them. I'm just saying when we talk about most improved, I'm talking about what is the greatest delta from what I was to what I am now. The only name on the board I see right there, Izzy, that I'm like, okay, I could see it. Even then, I'm like, he's just getting more minutes. I don't know how much better he actually is Dyson Daniels at plus 115.
That's the one that I absolutely love. A new place, new opportunity, just kind of really flourish there. I'm wondering, though, Amin, since we're talking semantics here, should we just change the name of the trophy? Instead of most improved, can it be breakout star or breakout season? Because then you can't be a number 1 or number 2 pick and really have a breakout season in your first 3 years. It's supposed to happen, right?
Yeah. So I had, I don't know, we were both voters. When I was a voter, I had unwritten rules in my head for every award, right? For most improved, here was my unwritten rules. You can't be doing something that we expected you to do within like the period of time we're looking at. And number 2, you cannot be a second-year player because that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to improve. If you're a rookie last year, you are not, the league never says this, but I, as a voter, I can reveal now, automatically, you were not eligible on my ballot for most improved if you're a rookie last year.
You know, it's a perfect example of that. Don McClain won won the most improved his second year, never even had close to the same season again.
So then beyond those tenets right there, then I go to, were you actually better, or is this just a function of you got more playing time? So a great example of this was CJ McCollum. The year before CJ McCollum won most improved player, if you look at his per minute averages, he's literally, and his efficiencies and everything, he's doing the same exact thing he did the year before. The only difference was his minutes shot up because they moved guys that were playing ahead of him in the depth chart, and now he got a lion's share of minutes. So to me, that's the Dyson Daniels boat. This is what he's doing this year. He went from 22 minutes to 33.9 minutes, so basically 34 minutes. Went from scoring about 6 points a game to almost 14. Went from 4 rebounds a game to almost 6 rebounds a game. 2.7 assists to more than 4 assists a game. And then his percentages are they're roughly the same: 48, 34, 59, 44, 31, 64. I think the reason why he jumps on people's lists is because the steals have been going crazy. He's tremendous in that regard. Versus, say, like someone like Cade Cunningham. Cade Cunningham, you're going to see the before and after. You're going to be like, okay, so 33 and a half minutes versus 35 minutes this year. Not the same. 22.7 points to 25.7 points. So 3 extra points. Nothing to sneeze at, but also hardly like, whoa, where did that come from? A 23 point per game scorer scoring 26? We're like, okay. The rebounds 4.3 to 6.1. That's big. 7.5 assists to 9.2 assists. That happens when you get better teammates. And then 45, 36, 87 on the splits versus 46, 35, 86. It's the same efficiency. A little bit more production. I don't understand how people are calling that most improved.
You know who had better improvements from the numbers perspective and was, I don't even think, in the top 10 of the most improved player ballot that year? Steph Curry in his unanimous MVP season. Go from 15 to 16, and that was an improvement.
That to me is like, because we all thought we knew who he was. He won MVP. This is the best version of Steph Curry there is. And then he goes, oh no, there's another level to this. To me, that's ultimately what most improved comes down to, right? And it's the only similarity it shares with one other award, which is Coach of the Year, which is, did we think this about you before the season started? That's all it comes down to. If I thought this about Cade Cunningham before the season started, then he can't be my most improved player. Ty Jerome? Holy shit.
Welcome back to Oddball. And I mean, during the break, I was thinking of somebody that I consider kind of like the prototype for most improved player. And I don't know if you have a better one for me.
Okay,
but
give it to me.
The guy who's won it, who I think is the perfect example, not just when he won it, but then what he did afterward, Gilbert Arenas.
Oh, yeah.
Gilbert Arenas, a second-round pick, played for the Warriors. Yep. And I mean, I think it goes into your sort of rules, right? It was a second year, so maybe he wasn't eligible in your book. Yeah. But if you look at like everything else in terms of not expected and then maintained it because it wasn't just a minutes thing, like I think Gilbert was not just the perfect person, like the prototype for the award, but people recognize who he is as a result. You know, not many people really knew who he was.
Yeah, Gilbert argued that he was always that good, and he just never got the opportunity.
Of course.
Speaking of getting the opportunity, folks across the pond might get the opportunity to watch some good old-fashioned NBA basketball, kind of, sort of, not really.
That's not how they talk over there.
That's not? Well, it's not good old-fashioned? No, okay. And I say that because Adam Silver, commissioner of the NBA, announced last week that the NBA and FIBA are exploring the creation of a new basketball league in Europe. Silver envisioned 16 teams, 12 permanent licensees, and then 4 qualifiers that make it through relegation / ascension, all that stuff that they love over there in Europe. He made it clear that this is not NBA expansion in Europe. This is a new league run by the NBA in Europe. And so, Izzy, I get a lot of people asking about this, and so I have to explain. So the way it works in Europe is every country has its own domestic league. And in that domestic league, they got a first division, they got a second division, they got a third division. The best teams from those domestic leagues get to play in a continent-wide kind of super league, right? The problem in Europe, or the problem, I should say in air quotes, not my problem, but it's FIBA Europe's problem, is the premier intercontinental league there is called the Euroleague, which our soccer friends might be like, oh, it's like the Champions League. Yes, exactly like the Champions League, except the Euroleague is owned by a private company. And this private company has a bunch of shares that are held by the big clubs in Europe. Barcelona, Real Madrid, right? Galatasaray, like all of these big clubs, they own Euroleague, right? They license through Euroleague. And so it is a system that does not allow for FIBA Europe to make any money off of it. So what does FIBA Europe do? They say, okay, we're going to make our own thing. They do have their own thing. It's called the Basketball Champions League, but that is generally considered to be subpar to the Euroleague, and in fact, even to the Euro Cup, which is the Euroleague's second division right there. So what do? You call the biggest bully not on your block. And that's the NBA. And that's where the NBA comes in, like setting up a league that has European values, but American business principles, so it can make a lot more money for everybody, but most of all for the NBA, for its owners.
So what is that? All right. So I've always thought that always for the last couple of years, that the NBA Cup should have been teams from Europe, teams from somewhere, some other international league that you just fit into the schedule somehow, the same way the soccer leagues do it, right? When they have those in-season tournaments with other leagues. And I'm just curious, like, does this help that potential out? Is there any sort of like interaction between the two, or is it just, hey, the NBA is coming in here and taking part in this and hoping to make some money out of these Euro leagues? Not going to be like a developmental league for us because they're too far, just getting involved with what's in place right now.
Yeah, I think it's more of the latter. It's getting involved with what's in place right now. And can there be co-branding or co-sponsored type events like that? The NBA Cup, is it the McDonald's Open, if you remember that, if you're old enough to remember that? Like maybe, but I think the main thing here is about making money for its owners. This is a growth industry. Basketball, while very rooted in the continent as the number 2 sport, they don't make money. Even like the Barcelonas of the world don't make money like NBA teams do. And so a lot of that is because European business principles, when it comes to sports business, lags behind the United States. Like we've figured out a way to monetize this thing like nobody else. And the Europeans really haven't. Now, many will argue, hey, that's on purpose. We want our tickets to be affordable and accessible to our fans. We want, this thing not to be sullied so much by business, in the way that, if you remember a couple of years ago, some American businessmen tried to start a super league in soccer that was away from the Champions League. Basically, same thing as a Euroleague, our own thing that we own and we make all the money off of, and we don't have to worry about relegation or promotion or any of those things. And it kind of crashed because the fans in Europe were like, to hell with all that. I don't care if it's good for business. It's bad for me as a fan. I'm wondering whether basketball, they'd be more willing to listen because of the NBA cosign on that.
So I guess other than just being able to sort of siphon some money from whatever's going on in Europe, I'm wondering like how this furthers the goal of Adam Silver. Is this because, he's talked forever about having a team in Europe. Mm-hmm. And in terms of the logistics of that, can, a team travel? Can it all work out? That level of travel, it almost feels like a way to get to, I don't know, some sort of trial balloon. I don't know what it is, whether it be, again, an in-season tournament where sometimes the teams travel overseas to participate or what. But the idea that this is a way to find out if a team or teams in Europe is feasible, if we might actually have a situation where it is a global league and not just a domestic league, because right. Like I said, I don't think anybody has come up with a feasible scenario for that to be the case.
So there's a couple of things, right? Number one, this wouldn't be their first foray into doing that. The Basketball Africa League is exactly that. In conjunction with FIBA Africa, they created this league that's like a super league. The best teams from the best leagues, domestic leagues, are the ones that are in the BAL, right? Number two, a lot of this, as was for the BAL, but a lot of this would be also infrastructure improvement, right? Like there's a part of this where the league goes, yeah, if you want to do this, this is not going to get it done. You guys need some upgrades in these facilities. Now, in Europe, that's a lot more feasible of a route to take than it is in Africa, right? So because it's a wealthier base that you're starting with, it's easier to expect certain sort of things, especially if you're working with some of the bigger clubs. Because again, I want to point out, they want to work with the established teams in Europe. They're not talking about starting new teams, although that right. They certainly didn't shut the door on that. So when you talk about having perhaps an NBA team that competes in the NBA but is based on the continent somewhere, step one is, do you have an arena that's good enough for that? And how do we make sure we have arenas good enough for that? Is by starting a league and telling everybody, hey, you got to get your arenas better. Now, are they going to be 20,000 seaters? Probably not, except for maybe some of the bigger teams, the bigger squads. But can we get stuff that is maybe not as big, but features many of the amenities that an NBA arena features in its footprint, whether it's club seating, like high income special sections that have all sorts of other amenities, the other bells and whistles that you think about when you go to an NBA arena. That's the stuff that would spur. And then the idea is that if there were going to be a team that does this, and I have to imagine it wouldn't be an existing European team that would make that leap, then that team gets to go and say, all right, we have an NBA arena, we've got an NBA team, let's go play in the NBA.
All right. So if that were to be the case, then we'd have to settle on some rules, right? Because according to everything I've read, they're not changing, right? This league's rules. This is going to still be FIBA rules, right?
Yeah.
So what is, because like this came up when Adam Silver was talking about the 10-minute quarters, and I hated it. And I'm just like, why do we care what the other leagues in the world are doing? We're the NBA. We should set the standard. But the FIBA rules versus the NBA rules just got me thinking, if this is the case with this one, and if we see a scenario down the road where we are merging or we are playing in an in-season tournament with these two different leagues or multiple leagues, which rules do we go by and which rules are better for basketball? Because when we play in the Olympics, we play FIBA rules and just like, sorry, United States, you're just going to have to deal with it. And it feels like that's the way to go because maybe because of the most talented, we can adjust to the rules easier. I'm not sure. But which way do you lean if that's to be the case? And which are the points of contention?
So we'll start with what rules. The rules are going to be Europe rules. And for those who be like, well, why would it be that? Well, let me put it this way. Other than the guys that got drafted out of the G League from G League Ignite over the last 3 or 4 years or so, 100% of players drafted by the NBA did not play NBA rules in their prior life, whether it was college with 2 halves and the goofy ass possession arrow, or playing in Europe, or playing in New Zealand and Australia, or playing in China, or playing in high school, right?
Overtime Elite had weird rules.
What's up?
Overtime Elite had a couple weird rules. Yeah.
No one plays 48 minutes, 4 quarters of 12 minutes. No one plays with the 23-foot 9-inch 3-point line that's somehow only 22 inches in the corner. No one plays with any of those rules other than the NBA. So to start a new league over there and say, hey, and by the way, we're going to do NBA rules is just, there's no point, right? All of these teams are already established there, or most of them that are going to be competing this are already established over there. So you just use their rules. And then, like, you don't have to worry about transferability because the reality is this is a separate league and the players that come out of it are going to be coming with the same quote unquote disadvantage of any player who comes to the NBA to play for the first time other than from the G League.
If you had a chance, side note, to take out, change one of the rules from NBA rules to FIBA rules right now, what should it be? To me, I'm taking out the defensive 3 seconds. I'm letting them play defense. I know we didn't like the zone defense back in the day. It was like a bad word, like in the 80s and 90s, but now just let them play.
Yeah, for me, it would probably be the goaltend. Like this thing that we're looking.
Such a big change that would be.
Is it not? I know, but like, but it's a thing that when they made that rule years ago, they made it for one guy. And then they didn't realize one day that everybody in the league would be able to play above the rim. So there is no inherent advantage there. So
Herro, you mean, right?
Yes, of course. That's why they changed the rule. Yes. Another question that's been asked is, would European stars rather play for their clubs in Europe? And to that, I say no, because most European stars, or not European stars, most players want to make as much money as possible. And the money in Europe is not like it once was. I feel like when Josh Childress went to Greece like 15 years ago, to maybe more than that, everyone lost their mind and like thought, oh, like Europe is just handing out money. Here's money. And the reality is the economy crash that happened like 08, 09, and then other things over the last 15 years, that basically made it so no, you're not going to make more money there. By way of example, the highest paid player in Europe right now is Kendrick Nunn. He makes $4.5 million per year.
Well, that's an interesting question you ask, Amin, because I wonder if that is the case. Like, are there players, and there probably would be, who would take far less money to be in a starring role, to not have to stand in the corner, do whatever your star tells you to do, and then, just maybe flame out in the playoffs and you're getting twice as much money. Like if you're getting half that, but still being a star and beloved and like playing to your full potential, I think it'd be a good amount of people that would do it.
I don't know. I don't think so. I think the guys that do that are the guys that would have been minimum. Like Kendrick Nunn was a minimum player in the NBA. That's why he went there. If he made anything more than minimum, if he made mid-level and was just told to stand in the corner, he'd absolutely take that any day of the week over that. I don't think the money moves people who can make more. That's just the way it is. And that's just the way we're going to do it for this show. That's going to do it for us here at Oddball. Remember, like, subscribe, rate, review, share, do all those things. And also remember, Michael Jordan, greatest player of all time.